When you were younger, did your parents ever fill your head with a bunch of weird superstitions? Like, if you eat your carrots, you can see in the dark, or if you swallow your gum, it'll stay inside your stomach for 7 years. That kind of thing. We all believed them too. Like, I only just found out last month that gum doesn't stay in your body for 7 years, and you just have to pass it a bit later after you eat it. It's a bit crazy, but I understand now that it's a great tactic to make sure kids don't do the wrong thing or behave and be generally healthy. One of the things my parents used to scream at me when I was younger was that if I watched too much TV, I'd get square eyes. Now obviously I grew older and realized that that was completely ridiculous, but when I was younger it scared me enough to stay away from the TV altogether. Even now, at 16, I still feel slightly uncomfortable after watching too much TV. I guess the fear was always sitting at the back of my mind. But that fear's come back recently. I'm writing this post because I think something's really wrong with my sister, and I can't explain what it is. My sister Elizabeth is 6 years old, or 6.5 as she would say. My parents had her when I was around 10, and we've been good siblings. I always look after my sister no matter what. I remember when Mom came home from the hospital with Elizabeth, and I was so confused. I didn't even realize she was pregnant at the time. To me, it felt like Mom just went out and came back with a daughter, but I loved her all the same. Elizabeth is a bit sheltered from other kids. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but she doesn't like leaving the house, and hanging around other kids makes her incredibly anxious. She has trouble learning sometimes. I think she may be on the spectrum, but Mom tells me not to worry. Elizabeth is homeschooled because she can't handle other kids, but despite all this, I still love her with all my heart. But recently, she's been different. I don't really remember how it started, but I remember sleeping one night and I could hear noise, like a faint buzzing. I tried to ignore it, but it was just bothering me too much. I got out of bed and looked for whatever it was so I could stop it. As I walked downstairs, the noise got louder and louder. I could see a bright light coming from the living room. I walked over and I could see Elizabeth sitting in front of the TV, staring at the static. The buzzing, however, was deafening. It was so loud, I called her name, but she either couldn't hear me or was ignoring me entirely. She kept staring at the screen. I stood there for about a minute before I realized she hadn't even blinked. She just kept staring. I walked over and shook her shoulder, but she didn't move. She kept staring at the screen. I looked at the static and noticed it was a bit different from normal static. It was like it was breathing. The buzzing black and white lines were pulsating in and out, shaking and weaving. I was fixated. It was so bizarre and so unbelievably loud. I shook her again, but she didn't move. I called out her name one last time before the TV shut off, leaving us in pitch darkness. "Jack," she said, "what are you doing up so late?" I was so confused. I explained to her that it was time to go to bed. I grabbed her hand to take her to her room, and it was ice cold. I asked if she was warm. "I'm sweating," she said. It felt like I was pressing my hand against an iceberg. I put her to bed, and that was the end of it. For that night. It happened again the next night. Staring at the TV static. The noise was somehow even louder. She sat there staring at the screen for an hour before the TV cut out again. Again, she acted as if nothing had happened. By the third night, I was sick of it. I woke up and it sounded like a tornado was swirling around my room. With every step I took down the staircase, it only grew louder. I literally had to cover my ears by the time I got downstairs. How could my parents sleep through it? It was like someone firing a gun right next to my head. I got down and there was Elizabeth, eyes fixated on the screen. I ran over to her, shaking and calling her name. Nothing. I pressed my hands against her. She wasn't cold this time, nor was she hot, nor was she normal. Her skin felt like it was buzzing, like it was vibrating. I ran over to the TV and tore the cord out of the outlet. There was a deafening ringing before the TV died. The darkness encompassed us as the light from the TV was sucked out of the room. We sat in silence for a moment. The deafening buzzing was gone. The house was so quiet you could hear every single individual creak. "Elizabeth?" I whispered. Nothing for a moment. I pulled out my phone and turned on the light. Elizabeth was staring at me with her mouth wide open. I whispered to her again, but she said nothing, nor did she move. I turned off my phone light, but I could still tell she was staring at me. Suddenly, the TV sprung back to life. The deafening buzzing returned. The light filled the room, and Elizabeth was now staring at the TV screen, mouth even wider. It sounds impossible, I know. The cord wasn't even plugged in, but the TV was somehow still working. I got down in front of Elizabeth to see if she was all right, and that's when I noticed it. Her eyes. They were normal, still green and slightly bloodshot, but there was just something off about them. Usually when you look into someone's eyes, you can see the life behind them, particularly in a child. That brilliant innocence seemingly dancing about. Her eyes were empty, as if there was nothing behind them. I couldn't even see my own reflection in them. It was like staring into a deep, dark pit. The reflection of the TV screen wasn't there. Her pupils just became some kind of black hole. I decided at that point that I had to get my parents. I got up to get them before I felt a chill shoot up my spine. I couldn't explain what it was, but it was the feeling that something was off. I turned to Elizabeth, who was in her usual position, but I noticed something more. The light from the TV had filled up the living room, and I had noticed something that I hadn't noticed before. In both corners of the room were my parents, staring at the TV, naked. I hadn't seen them before, but some part of me knew they had been there the whole time. They remained completely still. It was horrifying. It was like staring at some old painting. My heart felt like it was in my throat. It just felt so uneasy. Suddenly, the TV turned off as it normally did, and Elizabeth fell backwards onto the floor. Her mouth wide open, so unbelievably wide, almost physically impossible. I turned on my phone light to see. Elizabeth was shaking. She was shaking violently and her screaming. Oh God, her screaming was so blood-curdling. It was like it was tearing away at my eardrums. She just laid there, screaming and screaming and screaming. It never really stopped. It's been 2 weeks since all this has happened. I haven't slept in 2 weeks. The buzzing had stopped and everybody was back to normal, but it wasn't right. I lay awake every night, sitting up and staring at my door. I can hear the buzzing, but I know it's just in my head. My family's acting normal as if nothing ever happened. Everything functions as normal, but I know it's not right. At breakfast, they all engage in friendly conversation, but it doesn't feel real. Their discussion is all is normal, but it isn't right. It's just so off. When my parents hug me and tell me they love me, it doesn't feel right. Like they're lying through their teeth. But I can't be sure. and Elizabeth's eyes. I feel like I'm sinking into them every time I talk to her. At dinner, we all sit there happily as a family, but I feel like I'm sitting with strangers holding a gun to my head. Everything feels wrong. I don't know what it is, and I can't explain it, but nothing is right. I stare at my door every night. I sit awake in the cold of my room, staring at my door, not even daring to blink. I'm too scared. I know that my family is standing on the other side every single night, and I know that they're watching. They're waiting for me.